Hey guys, what is up? It's the Tominator. Today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite contests ever, and that is the 2010 Arnold Classic. And the reason I like this show so much is because the top four were just amazing. I mean, you had a young Kai Green who was really just burst onto the scene a year or two ago, and he was the returning champ after winning the Arnold last year in 2009. You had an exciting up-and-coming Phil Heath looking bigger and better than we'd ever seen him before. And you had Branch Warren, not my favorite bodybuilder, but I mean, this was some of the best shape of his career for what it's worth, so he did look pretty good in certain poses. And you had the Blade, Dexter Jackson, looking as aesthetic as ever, rounding out the top four. Now, Kai did manage to repeat and claim his second Arnold Classic title, although many people, including myself, felt that Phil should have won it. He was clearly sharper and, in my opinion, much more aesthetic of the two, especially at this point in his career when his waist was tighter and his physique flowed a little better. What's interesting to note, and what I never realized until very recently when I was searching for pictures to put in this video, is that the judges themselves thought this way too. Here you can see the official scorecard of the 2010 Arnold Classic competition, and note that for the first night of prejudging, and that's the column labeled judging, Phil actually had the lowest score, with Kai in second. So this denotes that the judges actually had Phil ahead of Kai during the prejudging, which is what most of the pics and video footage are taken from. I'm not even sure if they did another round of mandatories or comparisons in the finals, or if that was reserved solely for the individual posing routines. In any case, that's where Kai pulled ahead, which is to be expected if we're talking about posing, because we all know Kai has some pretty spectacular routines. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting, and it does bring a certain sense of justice to know that Phil was the rightful champ, if you were to base this show strictly on the prejudging. I think that will become apparent as we go through the comparisons in a moment. But just a warning before we get into this, please excuse the relatively poor quality of these photos. I had to scrounge them up from an old forum post since apparently bodybuilding.com is purging their servers or something of old content as the original links are no longer available. I've noticed the same with other major bodybuilding websites like Flex and Muscular Development as well. I mean, really, is hard drive space getting too expensive these days that you cheap bastards can't even hold on to pics from 7 years ago? Pretty pathetic if you ask me. But anyway, let's go through the poses, shall we? Front double biceps. I have Phil here all day. Now, in general, I think Kai tends to look better in this one with his peaky biceps. And I like the somewhat artsy way he hits it with the one leg out and the upper body slightly slanted. But here in this show, he looked a little smooth. Phil, in contrast, is a lot more defined, especially through the arms and abdomen. And I like Dexter in this one as well, but the camera angle isn't doing him any favors, and you'll notice that that's pretty much consistent across all of the poses, unfortunately. So we don't really get a fair shake for Dexter here, but he was in fourth, and he wasn't really in the mix among the top two, being Kai and Phil. But let's be honest, at this point, he was just a little too small compared to these other guys. Dex wasn't as big then as he is now, and it's hurting him here. 2010 Phil Heath is basically Dexter Jackson 2.0, at least in this show. So Branch looks surprisingly good here, I will say. I might even put him ahead of Kai in this shot, believe it or not, because he is more conditioned. His legs are easily the best in this picture, and his upper body measures up pretty favorably. So, am I saying Branch Warren beats Kai Green in a front double bicep? No, guys, come on. 9 times out of 10, Kai is going to kill him in this pose. But in this particular picture, and in this show, I'm saying Branch might have him. It's definitely close. However, I don't think he has the overall lines or roundness, certainly not the arms, to beat Phil in it. Moving on to the front lat spread, I give this one handily to Kai. He's always been very strong in this pose, and he's definitely displaying the best V taper in the lineup. Again, Branch is surprisingly good here. I would probably have him in second. Phil looks awkward in this pose as ever. No matter the year, he just can't hit it well. His arm dominance and thick chest really kind of detract from the lats, and he just can't fill it out properly due to his narrow structure. Dexter, again, it's hard to judge from this angle, but I wouldn't hesitate to say that he's fourth or third at best. It's not a good pose for him either, and I think Phil could probably edge him out with his greater overall mass. In the side chest, this one is tough to call, especially because this pic kind of sucks. The angle looks a little bit off, it's a little too low, and as a result, we're seeing all sorts of little bubbles peeking out beneath those arms. Phil in particular looks pretty thick and blocky here through the midsection. This is not a good shot of him because as we already saw in that earlier picture, he can look much better in this pose depending on the timing and angle. So based on this closer look, I would easily give it to Phil. Kai is a little bigger, and that's especially evident through the hamstrings and shoulders, but his waist is also more bloated, and he's simply not as sharp. So despite looking pretty shitty in this pick, I still got to give the nod to Phil. Dexter might be up there too, but you really can't tell based on this angle. I do prefer Kai to Branch here, though. Yes, Branch is out-conditioning him, but Kai is just so much bigger and rounder, especially upstairs. I think he just kind of out-muscles him in the side chest here. In the back double biceps, this is where things get interesting. Kai clearly has the edge in size. His back is the biggest on that stage, and even his arms and shoulders appear to be overpowering Phil's. So even though Phil is more ripped, I'm not sure I would give it to him. It's very close. Again, the angle is slightly off, so that's hurting Phil's size factor too. In fact, I'm honestly not comfortable making a call based on this pick alone. And unfortunately, I couldn't find Kai hitting the back double individually to compare it to one of Phil's. But based on what we see here, I'm not sure even all of Kai's extra mass is enough to stand up to this crisp quality that Phil brings. From head to toe, he's dialed in and just so complete in every muscle group, even at this point in his career. So I would probably give it to him by a hair just for the conditioning factor, if nothing else, because both guys do show very complete development in this pose. Even Kai's notoriously undersized traps and forearms, I don't really think hurt him all that much, at least not here in this contest. So these are relatively minor flaws, and I feel like people nitpick them a little too much because when you consider the overall, the big picture, the thickness and the detail through that back, the massive sweeping triceps and biceps that he has, plus the huge size advantage he had here in the lower body, Kai still looks tremendous in this pose. As for the other two, Branch looks all right. I mean, the back was never his strong suit, but he looks respectable here. Dexter would probably take third, though, in my book, because if only by virtue of his superior back development. That's one thing that Branch just is really lacking and lagging behind these other guys. The rear lat spread is one that Kai should really be running away with, right? Because we all saw how great he looked from the front, but man, for whatever reason, he usually tends to look very underwhelming when he turns around on this pose. We're not even seeing the same excellent V-taper he displayed from the front in the lat spread. It's kind of bizarre how he just seems to diminish in this pose from the rear. Phil looks good. You can see a nice Christmas tree there in the lower back, and his traps just appear to be popping out at you with that 3D effect. It's really awesome looking. Dexter, I'm sure, also looks good, but once again, you can't tell from this picture, man. It sucks. Branch actually looks amazingly good for him here. The asymmetry, though, through the lats isn't as glaring as it usually is with him. And maybe this was just a good shot because I swear, even in this very contest, he looked much worse in the rear lat spread during his individual prejudging footage. But geez, man, based on this one pick alone, if I didn't know any better, I would say he might even be the front runner here for this pose. His back looks wider than anybody's. Okay, let's just put a big asterisk on this one and say it's a toss-up between Phil and Branch with Kai and Dexter battling for third. And you can laugh at that if you want, and I won't even blame you. So it's pretty hard to make meaningful judgments off of a single crappy photo like this because, just judging off one photo can be very misleading, right? But unfortunately, that's all I have left to work with. As I mentioned before, I wasn't able to find a lot of material to go with on this one, so you'll just have to bear with me. Again, this side tricep shot is hardly fair to Kai, who's not even in the pose yet. And that said, I still think he looks good here. Actually, all of them do. Not really seeing any pregnancies like what was going on earlier in the side chest. They're all keeping it tight here. Overall, I like Phil the most in this shot, and his triceps are definitely the standout of the show. Dexter looks great as well, though, and even Kai. Nothing against Branch, but I would have him in last simply because his arms look too small in this pose. In the ab and thigh, though, this is a good look for Branch. Surprisingly so, man. As if we're focusing more on the mass and the conditioning, he takes this one hands down. Then again, if you're looking at shape and aesthetics more, it's hard to go wrong with Dexter Jackson. Phil and Kai are kind of hybrids of these two extremes, with Phil looking like a bigger version of Dexter with worse abs, and Kai looking like a slightly smaller and less shredded version of Branch. But man, Branch Warren is impressive here, right? His legs are massive and detailed and look like they've been carved out of friggin' granite. His abs are also probably the best in the shot, even better than Dexter's, I'd say. So based on this one pick, I would give it to Warren without a doubt. After that, it's tough to say. I feel like Kai looks a little smooth still, but then again, he's got all those striations in the quad. Phil looks diced and he's larger than the blade, but does that deserve to beat Dexter's superior flow in midsection? I don't know. I mean, probably, but I think Dexter looks great too. His legs look like they might be letting him down, though. Not seeing enough separation compared to the other guys. Now we come to the Most Muscular, and there's Phil cheating the fuck out of that line like he usually does. Looks like he's standing about 2 feet in front of Dexter. Let's just say he's mastered the art of out-angling. But even still, he's very dominant in this shot, and I don't think anybody could really hang with him anyway. But they all look impressive here. Even Branch with his crappy T-Rex arms is managing to make this one work with the hands-on-hip variation. Aside from the arms, he was definitely the most muscular bodybuilder in this show. Just look at the wheels, though, man. Crazy. Tom Platz-like, you might even say. Kai, even, he looks solid in the crab, which oddly enough is a pose where he would come to look downright weak in later years. But nothing wrong with this version right here. He's still not going to beat Phil in it, though. Phil somehow manages to look massive and ripped, while at the same time maintaining some measure of aestheticism with his nice shape and proportions and the full round muscle bellies. I give it to him in a heartbeat. Same for the hands class version. So after going through all these comparisons, would you agree with myself and the judges that Phil won this night of prejudging? Maybe he couldn't beat Kai in the posing routines, and let's be real, who can? But surely the judging round belonged to Phil. It was close for sure. I'm not saying he won by landslide or anything, because this entire top 4 was excellent. But I still think that Phil looked the best here and probably should have won the show. I don't care how entertaining Kai's routine might have been. I just can't see Phil coming in that much worse the second night, and to the point that Kai was able to overtake him. Because Phil clearly brought the better package to this show, and it remains one of my favorite versions of his physique to this date. But that's just my opinion, so let me know what you think in the comments below. But anyway, that's all for this one, homies. Thank you for watching. So until next time, this has been the Tominator, and I will be back.